All right, welcome back to the Great and Spacious Building. I'm your host, Dr. Wayne Denton, and today we're going to take a look at the issue of plural marriage in the LDS Church, and specifically how the church is dealing with questions and conspiracy theories surrounding the practice of plural marriage. And we're going to do this by looking at a document that the church uploaded on July 31st, 2025 to their website, specifically in the Church and Gospel Questions section. The article that we're going to look at is entitled Plural Marriage. As you can see, it should be up on the screen here. And we're going to do a little deep dive into a specific section of this, but we're also going to look at another section just for a little interesting snippet that, as a historian and a reader of footnotes, that I found pretty funny. So let's start with the overview. We want to know what the church's aim is for this webpage, for this article that they uploaded. So the overview here, the Bible and the Book of Mormon teach that monogamy is God's standard for marriage, unless he declares otherwise. In limited, specific cases, the Lord has commanded his followers to practice plural marriage. Some of these cases occurred in biblical times. From the early 1840s to about 1890, in response to revelation given to the prophet Joseph Smith, leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints taught the practice of plural marriage, also called polygamy. Over a period of about 50 years, 20 to 30% of Latter-day Saint men, women, and children lived in families that practice plural marriage. This practice required faith and sacrifice from both men and women. It was also a cause of significant opposition toward the church for many years. And yet the saints were committed to keeping God's commands and trusted that God would bless them for their obedience. Eventually, the Lord directed the saints to discontinue the practice. With what we have here, the church doing a decent job at trying to connect their practice of polygamy to the ancient practice of polygamy, starting off with the context of polygamy existed in the Bible. Think Abraham, many other individuals in the Old Testament. Fast forward to the 19th century, and it makes sense that if this is a restoration church, that polygamy may be a part of it. Thus, Joseph Smith receives the command to practice polygamy, connecting the LDS Church, this newborn church, to the ancient church of the Old Testament during that time. And then we've got a little apologetic for the third paragraph here that this required a lot of sacrifice for men and women, which is not incorrect, but it is really lightening the load that is polygamy and the way that it was carried out. So let's dive into the document. The way that these pages are set up, they're sort of big questions that outsiders or insiders that don't really know church history may ask. As you can see on the screen here, the document, the page is split into multiple questions here. Some of these are pretty interesting for newbies, or if you're a missionary talking to a possible convert. Do members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints practice plural marriage today? Others are more historical based, and that's really where I want to start for our page today. So we're going to dive in specifically to this question here. This question here. What is known about the beginning of plural marriage in the church? Boom. So let's jump in. So what is known about the beginning of plural marriage in the church? As you can see, I have something highlighted here. Some evidence suggests that the prophet Joseph Smith first received a revelation in the early 1830s regarding plural marriage. The revelation that's officially written down is from 1843, states that Joseph prayed to know why that God justifies some biblical figures of having many wives, and the Lord responded that he had commanded them to do so. Eventually, this is the document that ends up getting passed along to Emma Smith via Hiram Smith and causes a big hubbub. And it's a big problem for Joseph, leads to a lot of problems for the church itself. But this statement here, some evidence suggests that the prophet Joseph Smith first received a revelation in the early 1830s. Why then Would it not be until the 1840s that this officially makes it into D&C? And where is that actual revelation if that's the case? What are they talking about here, and why are they stating this? There's a reason, in my opinion, and I think other people would agree, you can find arguments the same, of why the church would try to argue that there's an earlier revelation for plural marriage in the church. And let's talk now about what they're talking about. I'm a historian, so I like primary sources. Specifically, they're talking about a source here from a guy named W.W. Phelps. If you studied the Missouri era of Latter-day Saint history, W.W. Phelps is sort of the guy that causes a big hubbub by writing an article about free people of color coming to Missouri, and the saints would respect their rights, bond or free. They're sort of allowing African Americans to settle alongside the saints, which in a slave state is sort of a no-no and draws a lot of negative attention towards the church in Missouri. But this document is supposedly a revelation from Joseph Smith as early as 1831, while Joseph Smith and a handful of others are hanging out in that Missouri territory. The document again comes from W.W. Phelps, but we have to understand a little bit of context of this document. Context is really important when we're talking about things like this or any historical period. So the revelation is supposedly from 1831. However, here's an important fact. The document that W.W. Phelps writes about this revelation doesn't come until 1861. So in 1861, he sends a letter to Brigham Young, who is now the prophet at that time, telling him, hey, Joseph Smith actually received a revelation in 1831. And guess what? Somehow I have the exact wording of that revelation. That's awful convenient. And if this document is legitimate, that's really interesting. But again, we have to dive into the document in order to really understand what's going on here. So I'm just going to start by reading some of the document here. So this is again from W.W. Phelps to Brigham Young in 1861. President B. Young, I have the pleasure of sending you the substance of a revelation by Joseph Smith Jr., given over the boundary west of Jackson County, Missouri, on Sunday morning, July 17th, 1831. With 7 elders, including Joseph Smith Jr., Oliver Cowdery, W.W. Phelps, Martin Harris, Joseph Coe, Ziba Peterson, and Joshua Lewis. This handful of individuals, they're all on the western border of Missouri, near Native American land. So just background context for what's going on here. So here's the really important thing, and it's really important to read all of the sources in order to really get this. W.W. Phelps admits something really important here. Among the company, there being neither pen, ink, or paper, Joseph remarked that the Lord could preserve his words as he had ever done till the time appointed and proceeded. From this point on, W.W. Phelps is going to somehow miraculously recall word for word a revelation from the Lord that Joseph Smith received and gave to these men on that day. So for 30 years, this revelation had not been written down. There was no pen, no paper. No one could have written it down. But somehow W.W. Phelps' mind had an absolute recording, perfect recall of this document 30 years later. Contextually speaking, that's extremely suspicious. I'm just going to read the revelation, and I want you to keep in mind that there are 30 years between the point where he supposedly heard this revelation and when he is actually writing it down. Verily, verily, saith the Lord your Redeemer, even Jesus Christ, the light and life of the world. Ye cannot discern with your natural eyes the design and the purpose of your Lord and your God in bringing you thus far into the wilderness for a trial of your faith, and to be especial witnesses to bear testimony of this land upon which the Zion of God shall be built up in the last days when it is redeemed. Verily, inasmuch as ye are united in calling upon my name to know my will concerning who shall preach to the inhabitants that shall assemble this day, to learn what new doctrine you have to teach them, You have done wisely, for so did the prophets anciently, even Enoch and Abraham and others. And therefore it is my will that my servant Oliver Cowdery should open the meeting with prayer, that my servant W. Phelps should preach the discourse, and that my servants Joseph Coe and Zeba Peterson should bear testimony, as they shall be moved by the Holy Spirit. This will be pleasing in the sight of your Lord. Verily I say unto you that the wisdom of man is in fallen state, knoweth not the purposes and the privileges of my holy priesthood. But ye shall know, when ye receive a fullness by reason of the anointing, for it is my will that in time ye should take unto you wives of the Lamanites and Nephites, that their posterity may become white, delightsome, and just, for even now their females are more virtuous than the Gentiles. So moving back from this document, obviously we have a big problem, citing a revelation as 1831, but it not being recorded until 1861, and having miraculous recall and apparently having the specific words of Joseph Smith is a problem. So why would the church take that leap? That just doesn't make logical sense. Why would they put themselves in a position, a very flimsy position of defending the possibility that this revelation actually came in the early 1830s? Well, if we dive down a little bit here, the Lord also commanded Joseph Smith to practice plural marriage. Evidence suggests he married a second wife, Fanny Elger, in Kirtland, Ohio, in the mid-1830s after he had obtained her consent and that of her parents. Fanny Elger. So the church, based on this document here, wants us to believe that Fanny Elger was Joseph Smith's first plural wife. This would allow them to skirt the possibility, the reality in many ways, since the documents don't really back this up. Unless there's something sitting in church archives that they haven't released as of yet, and I don't know why they wouldn't release it, because this would solve the issue really quickly. The other option, if this 1831 revelation isn't real and is created by W. Phelps, then Fanny Elger is an affair. Joseph Smith had an affair with a servant girl, and it wasn't ordained by God. It was just a man having an affair. And that's extremely problematic for the church, which tries to hold Joseph Smith in high esteem. And having an affair sort of slaps everything family related, all of the teachings of the church, their view of the family, and their view of monogamy today, and their view of fidelity. This infidelity would actually be a huge scar for Joseph Smith and his character, which just happens to be another one of the documents the church released, Joseph Smith's character, assessing Joseph Smith's character. So my belief here is that with a document that can sort of be disregarded due to 30 years in between the apparent event and the first recording of the event, we have the church playing apologist for Joseph Smith and trying to make Fanny Elger into a plural wife instead of what Oliver Cowdery called a dirty, rotten affair. So what do we believe? A 30-year gap in a document where there was no pen or paper available to record it? Or do we believe Oliver Cowdery's account of the Fanny Elger situation being an affair of sorts? And I think that puts the church in a really rough place while defending this. And I also want to point out that there is a contradiction here. So while trying to cite, even softly, some evidence, citing that the doctrine of plural marriage starts in 1830, we go back up to the overview from the early 1840s. So in the overview, we have the statement that contradicts the idea that there might have even been a revelation in 1830. So in one place we have 1840s, in another place we have, well, it might have been 1830. And I think that's to run cover for Joseph Smith and the possibility that Fanny Alger is likely an affair. So now I just want to, for fun, jump down here. There's a huge movement in the church nowadays. It's really interesting to sort of say that Joseph Smith didn't practice polygamy. And that's a really bold claim considering the documents that we have. Todd Compton writing entire books about the plural wives of Joseph Smith and really digging out great biographies of these individuals and putting all of that together in the book In Sacred Loneliness, plus the document section as well. So this movement to absolve Joseph Smith of plural marriage it's flimsy. There's not really anything to stand on. But the movement has grown large enough that the church did actually have to address that. As we can see, one of the questions here, did Joseph Smith practice plural marriage, or was it introduced by Brigham Young and others? And points in the church's favor here, they say it right out. Joseph Smith introduced the practice, not Brigham Young. Credible contemporary sources document Joseph's practice of plural marriage. So again, points to the church for being straight to the point that this is something introduced by Joseph Smith. There's not a historical record that can really point to anything other than that. But the reason I highlighted this, even though it's pretty straightforward, historians are all over this and pointing this out, and it's just well known, accepted across the academic and non-academic fields. But a reason to always read your footnotes. So if I click on number 15 here, and we scroll through here, so we've got things like the William Clayton Journal, we've got the Robert Call papers, and if we scroll all the way down here, the church is citing the Nauvoo Expositor, June 7th, 1844. They're citing the Nauvoo Expositor as a credible contemporary source. If we think back to one of the reasons for Joseph Smith's arrest, it was the destruction of the Nauvoo Expositor, which he saw as inciting violence by printing lies. The church is now admitting that what the Nauvoo Expositor had in there was actually credible. What does that say about Joseph Smith's destruction of the paper? Thanks for joining me today. Again, I'm Dr. Wayne Denton. This is the Great and Spacious Building. Before you end up leaving today, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell so you can get notifications for the shorts and videos that will be uploaded in the near future. Thank you so much and have a great day.